There's your completely massive and globally dominant commerce business, first party and third party. There is AWS, Amazon Web Services, which came out of nowhere and is now massive. You're in the hardware business, including Echo and Kindle and the phone, grocery delivery, payments, TV shows. You're now making TV shows, advertising. Jeff, how can you possibly do all of that?
Henry, you're exhausting me.
How can you possibly do all of that and do it okay? Even okay, let alone good.
So I think one way to think about this is, what are you really focusing on? So, I'm focusing on those things that I think make Amazon unusual. Genuine customer obsession. So like every single thing you just mentioned, when our senior executives sit down and review those programs, they're looking for customer obsession.
When you figure out what you stand for, everything becomes so much easier. I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who they're doing this and they're doing that and they're doing this and they're doing also this thing. And it feels like it's all over the place, right? Have you ever felt that? You're doing so many things and it feels like it's all over the place and you don't know how to bring it together. It doesn't feel like it fits together. Nobody understands what you're doing either. The way to bring it together is to figure out your most important core value. If you actually did the exercise, and I've talked about this in both my books, Built to Serve, Your One Word. If you actually did the exercise, you think about, what do I stand for? If you had to pick something right now, your single most important core value, what would you pick? Mine is believe. What's yours? And there's all sorts of exercises we can get into on how to actually do it if you're struggling with that. But just pick something. It's not going to be so far off. Whatever comes to mind right now, pick that. Now look at everything that you're creating, that you're selling, that you're offering, that's in your mind. And they all now kind of make sense. Everything that I do is belief. Whether it's making videos like this, whether it's making my NFT projects, whether it's going on my Discord, whether it's my other social media content strategies, whether it's speaking, whether it's books, whether it's my entrepreneur heroes trading cards that we turned entrepreneurs into heroes and made them their own baseball cards and use that to raise 6 figures for Kiva to help entrepreneurs in Africa build their businesses, right? Whatever I'm doing, it feels like it could be all over the place, but it's not, because it's still belief. Because at the end of the day, what I want to do is spread belief. Jeff Bezos wants to spread customer obsession. He wants to make a better experience for customers. And so he's in all sorts of different fields. Why? It feels like it's all over the place. It's not, because Amazon is not just a book business. Amazon is in the customer experience business. Right? That's his most important core value. What's your most important core value? It'll help make everything make more sense. It'll help make your life make more sense, your business make more sense, and it'll help your customers understand better what you're doing. I remember watching a clip of Jay-Z being interviewed, and they were asking him, how do you move from making music to being an entrepreneur, to having all these businesses? How does that make sense? And he said, it's just an extension of being creative. See, for him, it's not just about the music, it's about expressing creativity. And every field can add more creativity. Entrepreneurship can be more creative. Investing can be more creative. Product lines can be more creative. He sees himself not as a musician, but as a force of creativity. His most important core value is creativity. So it just makes sense to him to be able to jump from one field to another, to another, to another, where most people are stuck in the craft, right? You don't just do one thing. You don't want to do one thing. That's why you're an entrepreneur. You don't want to just do one little narrow thing for the rest of your life. But it feels like you're all over the place. And you are, until you can wrap it under your most important core value. And what that does is gives you permission to explore and to try and to taste and to go into new fields. But also the ability to do something much bigger. Because whatever your most important core value is, that's what you want to spread to the world. I want to spread more belief to the world. Jay-Z wants to spread more creativity to the world. And he could have done what most people do Most rappers, most musicians stick to just doing that thing. Okay, well, that's what I love and that's what I know, and so I'm just going to stick to doing that. How you become mogul status, right? How you start to change the rules of the game, how you start to have a much wider impact and bigger reach is to recognize that I don't just do one thing. I don't just have one skill. I've got a message. I've got a core value I want to put out to the world. And there's multiple ways for me able to do that. So Jay-Z sees himself through the lens of creativity. And then it makes sense. And it gives himself the permission to go off and chase those other ambitions. So for you, think about what is that most important core value? And some easy hacks, again, both my books go through this in a lot more detail, but think about who your favorite teacher was growing up. Think about what you loved about your parents. Think about your favorite movies, your favorite songs. Think about anything that made you come alive, any experience. Why did you love that teacher? For me, it was my OAC, my grade 12 French teacher. Why? It's not because she taught me French. Your favorite teacher wasn't because they taught you a subject matter. It's because they made you a better human. Madame Farr at my school, she helped me believe in myself more. When I doubted myself, when I wasn't getting the grades that I wanted to get, she helped turn me from a B and C student to a straight A+ student in my last year because she believed in me and she taught me how to believe in myself. That's why I love her, not because she taught me French, right? Who was your favorite teacher? Why? Why? They made you a better human somehow. What was it about them? And when you can connect the dots on all the things that make you come alive from your favorite teacher and favorite books and favorite music, favorite lyrics, favorite TV shows, favorite movies, favorite friends, right? Favorite heroes, you can connect the dots. You like them, but instead of it being a happenstance, like you hope that good things happen to you, you can now design it. You can engineer it. I want to bring more belief into my life. And now that that's on my consciousness, now that I'm aware of it, I can make that happen as opposed to just hoping something positive happens to me. When you figure out your one word, your most important core value, you can engineer your life to bring more of that into you. And then the more you have, you can give more, you can serve more, you can help more, you can uplift up others more. You can motivate and inspire and give courage and hope to the world more because you have more to give, right? If you're running on empty, you don't have much to give to anybody. So it starts with that awareness of what is your single most important core value. And then bring that to your life and your business. I believe Bezos is about customer experience. Jay-Z is about creativity. What are you? What are you? What do you value the most? And then with that lens, look at your life, look at your business, and see where are you following through and crushing it, and where are you not living up to it? Where are you doing the wrong things? What area of your life needs a little bit more of that? Because when you can look at your life through that lens, that's your best self looking back at you. That's the life you want to be living. Your highest self looking back at you and saying, hey, right here, the reason why you're not happy is because you're not living your most important core value. Figure that out, and you have a roadmap. You have a guide. You have a compass for the rest of your life.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
In my business dealings at Amazon, we often buy companies, smaller companies, smaller than Amazon, but sometimes they're fairly large companies like Whole Foods, but oftentimes they're very small companies. And I'm really mainly looking for one thing when I'm talking to the senior leaders of those companies, and it's, are they missionaries or are they mercenaries? Because the missionaries build better products and services. They care for their customers more. The mercenaries are trying to make a quick buck. They're trying to flip this company and sell it. They built it for sale. They always wanted to sell it. They wanted to get rid of it. And those companies aren't built to last. So that's the main thing I thought about when I saw these people on stage tonight, all the award winners, and I think it's probably true for everybody who goes into government service and takes that service seriously. You do that because it's a mission. And if the people in government service could easily make more money in the private sector. They're not doing it for that. They're doing it because they're getting meaning from it. And I tell my kids, you can have a job, you can have a career, or you can have a calling. And you want the calling, whatever that is, because that is when you're, 80 or 90 years old and in a quiet moment of reflection, telling yourself your most intimate version of your life story. What do you want to have? You want to have meaning in your life. You have to have had a calling.
I believe that the primary success factor for Amazon.com has been an obsession over the customer and a focus on customer service. This is clearly important in any business, but especially important online. And the reason for this is that word of mouth is incredibly powerful online. If you make a customer unhappy on the internet, they won't tell 5 friends. They will tell 5,000 friends on Usenet news groups and listservs and so on. Likewise, of course, if you can make a customer happy by meeting or exceeding their expectations, they can also tell 5,000 people and therefore, be evangelists for you. They can use the internet as a megaphone. So it's very important to do the things that you actually are going to claim to do. And what this means basically is the balance of power has shifted away from the merchant and toward the consumer, which is a great thing, I think, for everybody involved. And it's even great for the merchant as long as the merchant realizes it.
I was in all the senior people at Amazon do 2 days of customer service training every other year. And several years ago now, I was in one of those customer service training sessions, and I was taking calls from customers. I had an experienced customer service agent with me, listening in, helping me figure out how to use the tools, keeping me out of trouble, making sure that I did a good job for the customer. And the customer, this particular call that I got, the customer, as soon as we pulled up her order, the experienced customer service agent leaned over to me and whispered in my ear and said she's going to want to return that table. She had purchased a piece of furniture, a table. So I'm talking to the customer to the customer, and the customer says, "I need to return this table." And it turned out that the top of the table was scratched. It was packaged poorly. And then so we finished up and we handled the return and got all that done. And I said to the agent, "How did you know that the customer was going to return that table?" She said, "Oh, that table always gets returned." And so what does that mean? That means that, it's an anecdote, but if you systematize that and kind of pull back, it means that there's no communication flowing from these people who are talking to the customers every day back to our fulfillment centers where the actual shipping and packaging is going on. And it's very difficult to get that communication to happen. It can't just happen easily. So we built a kind of, inspired by the idea of an end-on cord, where any customer service agent can pull a product off of the Amazon website if they think that there's a problem. And then, of course, having pulled that product off, that sets in place a whole series of processes that go back, but we're not going to ship the same table to the same customer over and over.
Do you usually have a plan B?
I don't have plan Bs. I actually don't like plan Bs. I find plan Bs they defocus you from plan A. Plan B should always be make plan A work. Well, one of the things about maintaining, first of all, it's somewhat about the selection of the people. So if you want to have a creative culture,
when I interview people, I ask them to give me an example of something they've invented. And I always point out it doesn't have to be something that you actually took to the patent office, but it could be a metric that you invented and followed carefully. It could be a business process that you invented. But how do you go about, what's your method for? So you want to select people who like to invent their way out of boxes. And don't necessarily immediately go to either or. We can do A or B. And the right question is, how can we do A and B? What invention do we need to be able to do both? So that's a lot about selection of people. And the great thing about corporate cultures is they're very self-reinforcing. So somebody who comes to Amazon and doesn't like pioneering, doesn't like exploring, doesn't like going down blind alleys that oftentimes turn out to be dead ends, they'll leave. They're self-selecting. And so we have, over the last 18 years, collected a bunch of people who really enjoy this kind of pioneering approach. Once you are looking at the odds in a realistic way, it's very important for entrepreneurs to be realistic. And so if you believe on that first day while you're writing the business plan that there's a 70% chance that the whole thing will fail, and then that kind of relieves the pressure of self-doubt. I mean, it's sort of like, I don't have any doubt about whether we're going to fail. That's the likely outcome. And it just is. And to pretend that it's not will lead you to do strange and unnatural things. So and what you do with those early investment dollars, so if you have $300,000 and then you have $1 million, what you do with those early precious capital resources is you go about systematically trying to eliminate risk. So you pick whatever you think the biggest problems are and you try to eliminate them one at a time. And that's how small companies get a little bit bigger and then a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger until finally, at a certain stage, you reach a transition where the company has more control over its future destiny. When a company is very tiny, it needs a tremendous amount of not only hard work, but as we talked about earlier, luck. As a company gets bigger, it starts to become a little more stable, where at a certain point in time, the company has a much bigger influence over its future outcome. It needs a lot less luck, and instead it needs the hard work. And at that point, there's a little bit more pressure, because then if you fail, you have nobody to blame but yourself. The heart of entrepreneurship in some ways is about risk-taking, but I think that many people misperceive what good entrepreneurs do. Good entrepreneurs don't like risk. They seek to reduce risk. So they are, starting a company is already risky, and then you systematically eliminate risk step by step in those early days until you can get a company. You need a lot of, believe me, you need a lot of luck in all endeavors in life. And certainly Amazon has had, planetary alignment of the highest order. We're, lots of luck in our history. But you also need to systematically try to identify risks. And then as the company gets bigger and more robust, you can start taking risks again. But in those early days, a lot of it is about, okay, we have a good idea. How do we reduce risk? I'm not efficient with my time because efficiency, there's an embedded assumption when you're being efficient. And the embedded assumption is that you know where you're going. And I like to wander, because it's wandering that allows you to invent and to explore and to follow your curiosity. But wandering is very time-consuming. And so if I could have one more thing, it would just be more time. It's hard to have conviction about whether something will work. And the only thing that I can offer, every once in a while, you get a crisp moment of clarity where you just know some things are going to work. If you are persistent enough. And I think you can only do that if you start with the customer and work backwards. I don't think you can build that kind of clarity on what your competitors are doing or what kinds of technologies are available in the marketplace. That kind of clarity can only come from a deep understanding of customer needs. And the good thing about customer needs is they change slowly in time so that you can count on them. I know for a fact that 10 years from now, Amazon's customers will still want low prices. I know for a fact that Amazon's customers 10 years from now will still want fast delivery. They'll still want vast selection. And there's no chance that 10 years from now, somebody will come to me and say, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. So because those customer needs are so foundational, sometimes around those things you can get real clarity. And then you can invest, and you can know that your investments will pay dividends for customers over time. Whenever you empower people with new tools, you get unexpected and beautiful results. And we're seeing that. I think we're still in the early innings of seeing the kinds of change that AWS can bring to a whole group of entrepreneurs, including entrepreneurs inside companies.
You tell us a bit more about how you decide what new areas of business to get into.
Well, there are a few things that we think about when we get into new business. First of all, we want to know if it's successful, can it be meaningful in the context of Amazon's overall business? So we don't want to do things, it doesn't have to be successful. That's okay. We don't want any guarantees that the business is going to be successful before we get into it. But we do want to know that if we're lucky enough that the business is successful, it has to be meaningful. Our business is already at a scale where it doesn't make sense for us to focus on small industries. So that's one of the things that we like about digital media. It's a big industry. It's one of the things we like about Amazon Web Services. It has the potential to be a very big industry. Our retail business, retail is, the largest retailer in the world still has, single-digit market shares. These are huge, trillion-dollar markets, so retail can grow to a very large size. And so we want that. We want to know that if it's successful, that it has attractive returns on invested capital. So, we want to be able to convince ourselves that if it works, that there is a return one day on that investment. The third thing we look for is we really want differentiation. That's part of our culture. We're not very good at Me Too product offerings. I'll give you an example. I get asked, and I have been asked for the last 15 years, when are you guys going to open physical stores? And I tell people as soon as we have a differentiated idea. Because if we were to open physical stores and do it the same way everybody else does physical stores, we would just be, if there are already 100 well-run physical stores, if we're lucky enough to do a good job and have a well-run physical store, we would be the 101st well-run physical store. And that doesn't really add anything to the world. It's a kind of redundancy that customers end up not paying you for, and it's not fun. Do something you're very passionate about, and don't try to chase what is kind of the hot passion of the day. I think we actually saw this. I think you see it all over the place in many different contexts, but I think we saw it in the internet world quite a bit, where at the sort of peak of the sort of internet mania in, say, 1999, you found people who were very passionate about something. They kind of left that job and decided, I'm going to do something in the internet, because it's it was almost like the 1849 gold rush in a way. I mean, you find that people, if you go back and study the history of the 1849 gold rush, you find that at that time everybody who was within shouting distance of California was, they might have been a doctor, but they quit being a doctor and they started panning for gold. And that almost never works. And even if it does work, according to some metric, financial success or whatever it might be, I suspect it leaves you ultimately unsatisfied. So you really need to be very clear with yourself. And I think one of the best ways to do that is this notion of projecting yourself forward to age 80, looking back on your life and trying to make sure you've minimized the number of regrets you have. That works for career decisions. It works for family decisions. Do you want? I have a 14-month-old son, and it's very easy for me to, if I think about myself when I'm 80, I know I want to watch that little guy grow up. And so I don't want to be 80 and think, shoot, I missed that whole thing and I don't have the kind of relationship with my son that I wished I had, and so on and so on. One of the great paradoxes of inventing at a high level is that you need to be an expert in your domain area and you need to have a beginner's mind. You absolutely need both of those things. The world is too complex to actually just be a beginner. So, I can't, no matter how inventive I am, I can't go invent a new kind of brain surgery. You have to be a neurosurgeon. You have to already know all there is to know about brain surgery and then take it to the next level. The problem is, for many people, by the time they become true experts, they've lost that ability to see things in a fresh way. They've lost the beginner's mind. And so that's another thing. You always need to be stepping back and saying, if I'm an expert in launch vehicles or whatever it is, I need to step back and say, okay, if I were looking at this for the first time, what would I be seeing and noticing? These are just some of the things you need to do to be innovative. I am building, along with a team of people, including the father of the 10,000-year clock, a guy named Danny Hillis, in a mountain in West Texas, a very large clock designed to last 10,000 years. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Moments ago, he seemed sane. But the clock is a symbol for long-term thinking. And if we can build a clock, and we think we can, there's a lot of engineering that goes into this clock. It's exceedingly complicated, and we don't have enough time to talk about the cam that tracks the motion of the Earth's orbit as it deviates over the course of 10,000 years and so on and so on. There's a lot of interesting stuff if you want to keep time for 10,000 years. But the symbol is important for a couple of reasons. One, if we think long term, and here I'm thinking, when I say we, I mean we humans. If we think long term, we can accomplish things that we couldn't otherwise accomplish. So if I came up to you, Werner, and I said, look, I want you to solve world hunger in 5 years. You would rightly decline the challenge. But if I said, Werner, I want you to solve world hunger in 100 years, now that's more interesting. Because then you start to first create the conditions under which such change could occur. And all we've done there is change the time horizon. We didn't change the challenge, we changed the time horizon. So time horizons matter. They matter a lot. And the other thing I would point out is that we humans are getting awfully sophisticated in technological ways and have a lot of potential to be very dangerous to ourselves. And it seems to me we're, as a species, going to have to start thinking longer term. And so this is a symbol. I think symbols can be very powerful. The clock has 5 anniversary chambers. These are big. This is all carved out inside of a mountain. And in the remote, it's kind of like you have to take a pilgrimage to get there. And when it's finally done, we'll, let people come and tour the clock. But it has 5 anniversary chambers. The first one is a room that kind of like the cuckoo on a clock, and it shows this animation once a year. The second chamber does this animation once every 10 years. The third chamber once every 100 years. The fourth chamber once every 1,000 years. And the 5th anniversary chamber just once at the end of the 10,000 years. And we're only planning to build the animations for the first and second chambers. We figure our future generations can worry about the 3rd, 4th, and 5th chambers. I laugh a lot. So it is, there are, I think stress, you can be, I think one of the things that's very important to note about stress is that stress primarily comes from not taking action over something that you can have some control over. So if I find that some particular thing is causing me to have stress, that's a warning flag for me. What it means is there's something that I haven't completely identified, perhaps in my conscious mind, that is bothering me, and I haven't yet taken any action on it. I find as soon as I identify it and make the first phone call or send off the first email message or whatever it is that we're going to do to start to address that situation, even if it's not solved, the mere fact that we're addressing it dramatically reduces any stress that might come from it. So stress comes from ignoring things that you shouldn't be ignoring, I think in large part. So stress doesn't come, people get stress wrong all the time, in my opinion. Stress doesn't come from hard work, for example. You know, you can be working incredibly hard and loving it. And likewise, you can be out of work and incredibly stressed over that. So, and likewise, if you kind of use that as an analogy for what I was just talking about, if you're out of work, but you're going through, a disciplined approach of, a series of job interviews and so on and working to remedy that situation, you're going to be a lot less stressed than if you're just worrying about it and doing nothing. We got this company just about ready to launch, and we were looking at it and looking at this little tiny fulfillment center. We were here by then in this building. We had a basement fulfillment center. To call it a fulfillment center was very grand. There's a lot of puffery. It was 400 square feet, which is about the size of a one-car garage. And we launched this business, and we're looking at it, and we didn't know if anybody would order from us. We really didn't. And in fact, one of the software engineers looked at this little space, and he said, I can't figure out whether this is incredibly optimistic or hopelessly pathetic. And indeed, we didn't know. We had no idea whether anybody would want to buy things in this way. The business plan called for generating sales very slowly as customers changed their attitudes. The original business plan, which I thought was very optimistic at the time, called for Amazon.com to generate $70 million in sales in the year 2001. We actually generated in excess of $3 billion in sales in the year 2001. And we knew, by the way, that we were really on to something in those first 30 days. In the first 30 days, we got orders from all 50 states and 45 different countries with not a dollar of advertising, just all word of mouth. In the first year, we didn't spend anything on advertising. All of it was word of mouth. And that really forged the company that we were going to focus on customer experience because we saw the power of word of mouth so very, very clearly in those early days. There's something great about word of mouth online, by the way, and feedback from customers, which is that email turns off the politeness gene in the human being. It's wonderful. So people actually tell you what they really think, usually in all caps. So we get lots of info and feedback from our customers, and we try to use it well. Blue Origin is a company that's developing a vertical takeoff, vertical landing space vehicle, so it takes off on its tail like a normal rocket and then comes back and lands on its tail like a Buck Rogers rocket. It's designed to be reusable. We've built our first development vehicle. We built our second development vehicle. We're right now working on our third development vehicle. Great team of engineers located in Seattle. Another team of people test and operations in West Texas where we do our flights. And it's proceeding along very nicely. I'm hopeful that this third development vehicle will be our last, but we can't know for sure. And then we will build our operational vehicle and start taking people to suborbital mission. We'll sell tickets. The long-term goal of Blue Origin is to not only do suborbital, but also orbital, and to democratize space travel so that anybody who wants to go into space can afford to do so. You need reusability. So when you go look at any approach that doesn't have reusability is never going to be low cost. There are only two problems with space travel today. It's too expensive and it's too dangerous. Other than that, it's fine. So we hope to solve those two problems. And if you want to solve those problems and have a spacefaring species, you need to practice. And you can't practice with expendable vehicles. It's like, it's flying you get on a 747 with a bunch of other passengers, fly to Hawaii, and then throw the whole plane away. It's just a bad cost structure. And so we need reusability. So you have to get the vehicle back. And one of the ways to get it back is to put wings on it, and then you can land it on a runway. Another way to get the vehicle back is to land it vertically under rocket power. And both techniques have advantages and disadvantages. One of the things I like about vertical landing is if you get it to work, it's very scalable. It scales to very, very large size, whereas wings sort of, they top out a bit. Directionally, our goal, and this has been true for, it's kind of a cultural trait at Amazon, our focus is going to be the low-cost provider of these kinds of high-quality services. So as we are able to get smarter, as we're able to figure out how to do things more efficiently, we are going to be returning those cost efficiencies to customers in the form of lower prices on things like EC2. There are other things that that it may be that we need some instance sizes that are smaller than what we have today. So the smallest instance we have today is 10 cents per compute hour, and we're also looking always at returning some of the cost savings we get on things like bandwidth charges, disk space charges, and so on and so on. The advice that I would give entrepreneurs is, and I do this, I meet sometimes with young aspiring entrepreneurs and college grads, and I have, the main thing is don't chase the hot new thing, whatever it is. It's so hard to catch something that everybody already knows is hot. Instead, position yourself and wait for the wave to come to you. And the way so then you would say, well, where? Position myself where? And I think what you do, position yourself in something that captures your curiosity, something that, that you're missionary about. Well, I tell people, when we acquire companies, I'm always trying to figure out, is this person who leads this company a missionary or a mercenary? And I don't like mercenaries, and I don't like mercenary cultures. And the missionary is building the product, building the service, because they love the customer, because they love the product, because they love the service. The mercenary is building the product or the service so that they can flip the company and make money. And one of the great paradoxes is that the missionaries usually end up making more money than the mercenaries anyway. A lot of people, and I'm just not one of them, believe that you should live for the now. I think what you do is you think about the great expanse of time ahead of you and try to make sure that you're planning for that in a way that's going to leave you ultimately satisfied. So this is just this is the way it works for me. And I mean, everybody needs to find that for themselves. So I think there are a lot of paths to satisfaction, and you need to find one that works for you. I always tell people, sometimes I get, we'll have a good quarterly conference call or something, and Wall Street will like our quarterly results, and people will stop me and say, congratulations on your quarter, and I say thank you. But what I'm really thinking is, that quarter was baked 3 years ago. Right now, I'm working on a quarter that's going to reveal itself in 2021 sometime. And that's what you need to be doing. You need to be out sort of, 2 or 3 years in advance. And and then why do I need to make 100 decisions today? If I make like 3 good decisions a day, that's enough. This is something that I think is super important for young people to understand, and for parents to preach to young people. It's really easy for a talented young person to take pride in their gifts. They can say, I'm really athletic, or I'm really smart, or I'm really good at math. And that's fine. You should celebrate your gifts. You should be happy, but you can't be proud of them because they're gifts after all. They were given to you. What you can be proud of is your choices. How did you decide to use your gifts? Did you study hard? Did you work hard? Did you practice? The people who really excel combine gifts and hard work. And the hard work part is a choice. You get to decide that. And that is something, when you're looking back on your life, you'll be very proud of.
When you buy over the internet, Amazon, Do you ever get the wrong order? Is anything ever wrong? What do? Do you call up and complain, or you don't have any problems?
No, I'm a customer of Amazon, hopefully like all of you in this room.
Is there one person full-time who services your account?
If there's anyone in this room who's not an Amazon customer, see me right afterwards and I'll walk you through it. It's, I have problems sometimes, and I treat them like the same way I treat a problem that I would get from a customer. My email address is famous, and I keep it, and I read it. It's jeff@amazon.com. I don't see every email that I get anymore because I get too many, but I see a lot of them. And I use my curiosity to pick out certain emails. So I'll get one from a customer, and there's a defect. We've done something wrong. Usually people are writing us, not always, but usually they're writing us because we've screwed up their order somehow. And so I'm looking at this, and for some reason, something seems a little odd about that one. And so I'll ask the team to do a case study and find real root cause, or causes, it's usually causes, real root causes, and then real root fixes. So that when you fix it, you're not fixing it for that one customer, you're fixing it for every customer.
Amazon has 14 leadership principles, and this is the one that often catches people a little by surprise, because one of our leadership principles is that good leaders are right a lot. And it sounds kind of like, well, great, but is there some way that I can practice being right a lot? And you're not going to be right all the time, but I do think with practice, you can be right more often. And I've observed people who are right a lot, and I notice a few things about them. The first is that people who are right a lot, they listen a lot. And people who are right a lot change their mind a lot. And people who are right a lot, they seek to disconfirm their most profoundly held convictions, which is very unnatural for humans. So humans mostly, as we go about life, we're very selective in the evidence that we let seep into us. And we like to observe the evidence that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. And people who are right a lot work very hard to do that unnatural thing of trying to disconfirm their beliefs.
I was living and working in New York City in 1994. I came across the fact that the World Wide Web was growing very quickly. It was tiny, but it was growing very fast. Most people had not heard of it. And I came up with this idea. The idea initially was very simple. It was to sell books online. And I went to my boss, who I liked a lot. His name was David. And I said, I have this idea to start this company to sell books on the internet. And he took me on a long walk in Central Park in New York and listened to this idea in great detail, and he said, it actually sounds like a really good idea to me, but I think it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. And I thought about that. That made a certain amount of sense to me. And he said, why don't you think about it for 2 days before you make a final decision? And so I went away and I thought about this. And I was trying to figure out how to make this decision, because in the moment, personal life decisions, those choices can be very challenging. And I finally figured out for me the right way to think about it, which was I wanted not to have regrets. I pictured myself, 80 years old, and thinking back on my life in a quiet moment of reflection. Would I regret leaving this company in the middle of the year and walking away from my annual bonus and all of those things that in the moment can be very confusing? And I thought, when I'm 80, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not even going to remember it. But what I will do, I know for a fact, I have this idea, and if I don't try, I'm going to regret having never tried. And I know also, if I try and fail, I'll never regret having tried and failed. And as soon as I thought about it that way, I knew I had to give it a try.
We're very interested in physical stores, and I've been asked for years, we ever open physical stores? Literally 20 years I've been asked the question, and I always say yes, but only when we have a differentiated offering, something that's not me too. Because that space, physical stores, is so well served. If we offer a Me Too product offering, it's not going to work. And it's also we're not very good at that. Whenever we've tried dabbling in something that's a Me Too service, we tend to get beaten. It doesn't work. Our culture is much better at pioneering and inventing and So we have to have something that's different. And that's what Amazon Go is. It's completely different. The Amazon bookstore, completely different. And we have ideas about how to merge Prime and Whole Foods to make that. Those are still rolling out. You haven't seen them yet. But to use Amazon Prime to make Whole Foods a very differentiated experience. And so what we're going to be able to do is take some of our resources, some of our technological know-how, and expand the Whole Foods mission. They have a great mission, which is to bring nourishing food to everybody, organic, nourishing food to everybody. And but we have a lot to bring to that table in terms of resources, but also in terms of operational excellence and in terms of technology know-how.
How do you handle these mavericks? How do you protect them from the institutions destroying them?
Well, I think that has to be culture. You have to teach the value that these people bring, but also I would push hard on the mavericks to say you also have to be organized. You can't just be a crazy person. So it's fine to be a maverick, but write your ideas down, sell your ideas, persuade, create the conditions where the ideas can blossom. You can't get anything done if you're not, if you're just purely a creative person with zero organizational skills. You're probably not going to get much done.
Be stubborn on vision and flexible on details. You really can't accomplish anything important if you're not stubborn on vision, because things that are important take a long time. They take teams. You can't do it by yourself, and so you really need to have a crisp idea of the vision. You need to stay incredibly relentless on that vision, but you need to be flexible on the details, because you've got to be experimental to accomplish anything important, and that means you're going to be wrong a lot, and so you're going to try something on your way to that vision, and that's going to be the wrong thing, the wrong decision. You're going to have to back up, take a little course correction, and try again. And so you cannot be stubborn on the details. You have to be flexible on the details.
We would all love all of our numbers to be smooth lines up and to the right, and that would be terrific, but that's not how it works. Those numbers are output measures. And I guess you could try to manage your quarterly earnings very precisely, but I think personally that would be a mistake. Most of the work that we put into any particular quarter happened years ago. So it's not, there aren't that many knobs you can turn during a quarter. You can, but they're like eating your seed corn if you turn those knobs. You don't want to do that. And so people. I think if you focus on the controllable inputs to your business instead of the outputs, in the long term, you get better results. So the Benjamin Graham quote here is that in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. And I think people are well advised to build a company that wants to be weighed and not voted upon. And that means having good return on invested capital and having lots of free cash flow. But if I said, here's a job I would reject. If somebody came up to me and said, Jeff, I want your job to be to drive up the Amazon stock price and just manage that directly. Now this might sound ridiculous to some of you, but many companies actually do this. They actually go out and they try to sell the stock. That's kind of the final output. And it's much better to say, okay, let's not do that. That's not going to be sustainable. It's kind of a silly approach. What are the inputs to a higher stock price? And you say, okay, well, free cash flow and return on invested capital are inputs to a higher stock price. Okay, so let's keep working backwards. What are the inputs to free cash flow? And you keep working backwards until you get to something that's controllable. And a controllable input for free cash flow would be something like lower cost structure. And then you back up from there and you say, okay, well, if we can improve our picking efficiency in our fulfillment centers and reduce defects are very, very costly. It's probably, reducing defects at the root is one of the best ways to lower cost structure. And so then that starts to be a job you would accept. You would say, if you're a reasonable person, you would say, I have no idea how to drive up the stock price. I can't manage that directly. It's not a controllable input. But I can make your picking algorithms more efficient. And that will reduce cost structure. And then, follow that chain all along the way.
Failure and invention are inseparable twins. It's everybody wants to be inventive. You know, if you go talk to corporate America or any institution actually, government agencies and so on, innovation is something to be proud of. People like invention. But the problem is they don't like failure. And you cannot have invention without failure. If you already know it's going to work, it's not an experiment. And only through experimentation can you get real invention. The most important inventions come from trial and error with lots of failure. And the failure is critical, and it's also embarrassing. And so that's why people, when we're kids, we always are doing trial and error, and we're never embarrassed. You know, you watch a little toddler, and they will try for hours to put a square peg in a round hole, and it never works. But it doesn't keep them from trying. And they try things like that, and that's how they learn. And we all have that when we're little, and then as we get older, somehow, it's not as cool as you get older to fail and to fall down. It looks clumsy, and so we get in our grooves, we have a set of expertise and skills, it's kind of a comfort zone, and you have to constantly push yourself to say, no, I don't care about failure. In fact, I say at Amazon, we have to grow the size of our failures as the size of our company grows. We have to make bigger and bigger failures, because otherwise none of our failures will be needle movers. And so I would see it as a very bad sign over the long run if Amazon wasn't making larger and larger failures. And if you do that all along the way, that is going to protect you from ever having to make that big, kind of Hail Mary bet that you sometimes see companies make right before they fail and go out of existence.
As the owner of the Post, I know that at times the Post is going to write stories that are going to make very powerful people very unhappy. And
are you upset if they are writing critical stories about Amazon, which they do?
No, I'm not upset at all. When I first bought the Post in 2013, never. And I never. I would be humiliated to interfere. I would be so embarrassed. I would turn bright red, and it has nothing to do with. I don't even get so far. I just don't want to. For me, it would feel icky. It would feel gross. It would be one of those things when I'm 80 years old. I would be so unhappy with myself if I interfered. Why would I? Yeah. I want that paper to be independent. Amazon, one of the things we try to do is have multiple paths to yes. And so here's a little thought experiment for you. If you are a junior executive at Amazon, and if Amazon did this in the typical kind of corporate hierarchy way, you had an idea. You need to get your boss to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. There are probably 5 levels or more before that idea gets the go-ahead. Assume instead that you're an entrepreneur with a startup company idea and you need venture capital. You go to Sand Hill Road and you go to the first venture capitalist and they tell you no. And you go to the second one and they tell you no. Maybe your 20th one tells you yes. You got 19 no's and 1 yes, and you're still good to go. So that venture capital model there's multiple paths to yes. There were 20 people who could give you a yes, and it didn't matter how many gave you a no. So if you want innovative thinking, you have to think about how can we you want a large number of high judgment people empowered to greenlight things. You want multiple paths to yes. And you want a system where, as a junior Air Force officer with a good idea, the first 5 people tell me no, and somehow I can still go pursue that idea. So you got to figure out, that's an organizational challenge that big organizations have to figure out a way to do. And by the way, I get, this happens all the time. I'll say, I don't think that's a good idea, but somebody else will greenlight it. And I'm fine with that, because usually the cost of the experiments is pretty small. Things only get expensive when they work, right? Once something works, you're like, whoa, we need to double down on that. And then the spending can get heavy, and then those become big consequential decisions, and that's where the hierarchy and the using the judgment of the most senior people to me, this really helps.
Well, 2 pizza teams is something that we've been preaching at Amazon almost from the very beginning, and it's a simple idea, which is no team should be so large that it cannot be fed with just 2 pizzas. And so obviously to do great things you need big teams, but you need to subdivide them. And the reason that it's so helpful is because there's a natural, we humans grew up around campfires and telling each other stories, and you're sitting at tables tonight that have about 10 people at each table. 10 people, maybe 12 people, is the perfect size to have a natural human coordination without a lot of structure. And if you want to have a big group of 100 people or 500 people organized, you have to have a lot of structure to make that work. And so if you can arrange to do big things with a multitude of small teams, and that takes a lot of effort to organize that way, but if you can figure that out, the communication on those small teams will be very natural and easy.
Warren Buffett has this great quote. He says, you can hold a rock concert, and that's okay, and you can hold a ballet, and that's okay. Just don't hold a rock concert and advertise it as a ballet. Investors come in all shapes and sizes. They have different investment horizons, different approaches, different beliefs about what the right kind of portfolio looks like. And so it's not one, people use Wall Street as a shorthand, but there isn't one type of investor. They come in all shapes and sizes. And you have to be super clear about what kind of company you're trying to build, what your approach is. We laid that out in our 1997 annual shareholder letter. We said we were going to take big bets. We said they were going to fail. We said some of them hopefully were going to work. We said we were going to invest for the long term, that we were going to try to take advantage of market opportunities as they arose. And there's a certain kind of investor who is aligned with that approach. And so, again, you can hold the ballet or the rock concert, and both can work. We don't meet with our biggest investors. We meet with investors who have low portfolio turns. So, investors that have, many investment funds have very high portfolio turns. They turn their portfolio multiple times per year. They're not really investors, they're traders. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different thing. But where are you going to spend your time and your energy is one of the most important decisions you get to make in life. We all have a limited amount of time, and where you spend it and how you spend it is just an incredibly levered way to think about the world. And so if you're going to spend time, explaining the stock or the company, really, we don't really explain the stock, we explain the company to people. You should do it to people who are long-term investors rather than traders. That's our point of view. One of the unusual things that we do in the Kindle device business is we sell our hardware near break-even. And so we make money when people use the device, not when they buy the device. And that is very aligning with customers. If I buy a device and I put it in my desk drawer and never use it, then Amazon doesn't deserve to make any money. Likewise, it causes us to have the right kinds of behaviors. So for example, if we're not making money when people buy the device, then we don't need people to be on the upgrade treadmill. We have people who are still using 5-year-old Kindle Ones, and we're perfectly happy about that. AWS is very similar because it's a pay-as-you-go service. We are not incented to get people to overbuy hardware, to operate at low utilization rates. Our point of view on this is if we can arrange things in such a way that our interests are aligned with our customers, then in the long term, that will work out really well for customers, and it'll work out really well for Amazon. My view is I don't even like the phrase work-life balance. I think it's misleading. I like the phrase work-life harmony, because I know that if I am energized at work, happy at work, feeling like I'm adding value, part of a team, whatever energizes you, that makes me better at home. It makes me a better husband, a better father, and likewise, if I'm happy at home, it makes me a better employee, a better boss, all the things. It's not primarily about, there may be crunch periods where it's about the number of hours in the week, but that's not the
that's not the real thing. Usually it's about, do you have energy? And is your work depriving you of energy, or is your work generating energy for you? And you know, there are people, everybody in this room knows people who fall into these two camps. You're in a meeting and the person comes in the room. Some people come into the meeting and they add energy to the meeting. Other people come into the meeting and the whole meeting just deflates. And those people just, they drain energy from the meeting. And you have to decide which of those kinds of people you're going to be. Are you going to add energy?
And the same thing at home.
And the same thing at home. And it's a wheel, it's a cycle, it's a flywheel, it's a circle, it's not a balance. Because a balance, that's why that metaphor is so dangerous, because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And you could be out of work, have all the time for your family in the world, but really depressed and demoralized about your work situation, and your family wouldn't want to be anywhere near you. They would wish you would take a vacation from them. And so it's not about the number of hours, not primarily. I suppose if you went crazy with 100 hours a week or something, yeah, that maybe there are limits, and they probably. But I've never had a problem, and I think it's because both sides of my life give me energy, and that's what I would recommend. And that's what I do recommend to interns and execs. The question is always, why not stick to the knitting? So, and my point of view on sticking to the knitting is that it's not the right thing for most businesses to be that focused. It's true that you hone skills in a business. You learn to be really good at a few things, and you do want to extend out from those skills. But your customer needs change slowly over time, and you have to learn new skills on behalf of your customers. So basically, our customers, we had a bunch of readers as customers, people who love to read. And they didn't know it, our customers, they weren't asking directly, but basically they were saying to us, you're going to have to learn a new skill. You're going to have to stretch and learn how to manufacture hardware so that you can continue to serve me 10 years from now. That's what our customers were telling us. And that's good. If businesses, try new things and stretch their muscles and put themselves in uncomfortable situations, I think one of the reasons that businesses stick to the knitting is because it's way more comfortable. There are a couple of other things that are essential for innovation and invention that are not as fun. One of them is you have to have a willingness to fail. You have to have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time. If you do something in a new way, and I don't care what it is, people are initially going to misunderstand it relative to the traditional way. And there'll be well-meaning critics who, genuinely want the best outcome, but they're worried about this new way. And there'll also be, of course, self-interested critics who have a vested interest in the traditional, they have some profit stream tied to the traditional way. But doing things, if you never want to be criticized, for goodness sake, don't do anything new. So it's okay though, if you have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time, if you have a willingness to fail, then what you can do is you can ramp up your rate of experimentation. So successful invention is inventions that customers care about. It's actually relatively easy to invent new things that customers don't care about. But successful invention, if you want to do a lot of that, you basically have to increase your rate of experimentation. And that you can think of as a process. How do you go about organizing your systems, your people, all of your assets, your own daily life and how you spend time? How do you organize those things to increase your rate of experimentation? Because not all of your experiments are going to work. You need people who, and this is very tricky, you need people who are experts in a certain domain area, because the world is so complex today, it's really hard to invent something if you're not an expert, if you don't have the underlying tools at your disposal and know what's going on. You can't invent something in neurosurgery without knowing something about neurosurgery. It's just going to be very difficult because we're very advanced. And that's true in every field of endeavor. But to really be an inventor, you have to combine that expertise with the beginner's mind. You have to have a certain childlike ability to not be trapped by your expertise. And that fresh look, that beginner's mind, once you're an expert, is unbelievably hard to maintain. But great inventors are always looking. They have a certain divine discontent, and they may have seen something 1,000 times, and still it occurs to them that that thing, even though they're accustomed to it, could be improved. And that's, you have to look for people like that. And I also think cultures support that. You can't, even if you're that kind of person, if you're in a culture that doesn't support failure, willingness to fail is critical for invention. Willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time. Most inventions don't really work that well in the beginning. They're clumsy, they're little toddlers, they're always falling and tripping. And so you have to have a culture in your organization that supports this kind of stumbling and wandering. Just because you're wandering doesn't mean you're lost. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're trying to invent. Senior executives, you should have the least stress. There's this weird, I think, false idea that CEOs, I'm a CEO, there's this false idea that CEOs are under the most stress. Well, I look at that, I'm like, why? You're in charge. Why don't you delegate the stress? It's your choice. And so you have to figure out how to set up your life in such a way that you can minimize the things. From the very beginning, in 1994, when I came across this fact that the web was growing at 2,300% a year, I was working on Wall Street, a very specialized kind of investment bank called a quantitative hedge fund, a company called D.E. Shaw. And when I decided I was going to go do this crazy thing, I went and told my boss, and he said, well, let's go for a walk. So we went on a 2-hour walk in Central Park. And he actually thought it was a good idea. He's a very smart guy. His name's David Shaw. He's one of the few people I know who has a fully developed left brain, a fully developed right brain, just a super smart guy. And he said, this is a great idea, but it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. That was actually a compelling argument to me. And so I went away. He convinced me to think about it for 2 more days. And it was very hard to make that decision. And until I found the right framework in which to make the decision. And I think because I know there are a lot of people who are interested in entrepreneurial activities out there, I think this could be useful. It's the right framework for me anyway to make the kind of decision was a regret minimization framework. So I projected myself into the future, and I'm 80 years old, and I'm looking back on my life. What do I want to have done at that point? I want to have minimized all the regrets that I have. And I knew that when I was 80, there was no chance that I would regret having walked away from my 1994 Wall Street bonus or any of that kind of thing. I wouldn't even remember that. But I did think there was a chance that I might regret not having participated somehow in this thing that I thought was going to be very exciting called the internet. And I also knew that if I tried and failed, I wouldn't regret that. So once I thought about it that way, it became incredibly easy to make that decision. I very frequently get the question, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And that is an interesting question. It's a very common one. I almost never get the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that that second question is actually the more important of the two. Because you can build a business strategy around the things that are stable in time. And so as you pointed out, in our retail business, we know that customers want low prices. And I know that's going to be true 10 years from now. They want fast delivery. They want vast selection. It's impossible to imagine a future 10 years from now where a customer comes up to me and says, Jeff, I love Amazon, I just wish the prices were a little higher. You know how I love Amazon, I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. Impossible. And so the effort that we put into those things, spinning those things up, we know the energy we put into it today will still be paying dividends for our customers 10 years from now. And so those, when you have something that you know is true, even over the long term, you can afford to put a lot of energy into it. On AWS, the big ideas are also pretty straightforward.
It's impossible for me to imagine that 10 years from now, somebody is going to say, I love AWS, I just wish it were a little less reliable. Or I love AWS, I just wish you would raise prices. It should be a little more expensive. Or I love AWS, and I wish you would innovate and improve the APIs at a slightly slower rate. None of those things you can imagine. And so the big ideas in business are often very obvious, but it's very hard to maintain a firm grasp of the obvious at all times. But if you can do that, and continue to spin up those flywheels and put energy into those things, as we're doing with AWS, over time, you build a better and better service for your customers on the things that genuinely matter to them. You know, as soon as you're doing something new, it's like being a toddler all over again. You get up, you fall down, you get up, you fall down, you get up, you fall down. And so businesses need to do that same thing. They need to remember that it's not that bad to fall down, and it doesn't hurt that much. When we try things like Amazon Web Services, we didn't know that was going to work. It has worked really well, but it's the kind of thing that if it hadn't worked, I always tell people, well, guess what? If something doesn't work, the day we stop doing it, all that will happen is our operating margins will improve. It won't be that bad. And companies get afraid. I think most companies get criticized for experiments that they tried that failed. But really, companies should be criticized for the omissions, the things they should have tried and didn't. And those almost always go unremarked. That blank sheet of paper stage is one of the hardest stages. And one of the reasons it's hard is because at that stage, there's nobody counting on you but yourself. You know, one of the things that is very motivating, I mean, today it's easy because we've got, millions of customers counting on us and, thousands of investors counting on us and then thousands of employees all counting on each other. But in that beginning stage, it's really just you. And you can quit any time. Nobody's going to care. And so you set about doing the simple things first. So you want to start a company. Well, the first thing you do is you should write a business plan. And so I did that. I wrote about a 30-page business plan. I wrote a first draft. In fact, I wrote the first draft on the car trip from the East Coast to the West Coast. And that was that is very helpful. Now, the business plan won't survive its first encounters with reality. It will always be different. The reality will never be the plan.
If you want another amazing Jeff Bezos clip, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
If you focus on the controllable inputs to your business instead of the outputs, in the long term, you get better results.
Dream big, act small.